Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back, everyone. In today's class, we're going to be looking at how the letters appear when they are at the end of a word, meaning they are the final letter in the word. So let's start off with the alif. So when the alif is the last letter in a word, it will appear like this, which is the same as when it's in the middle of a word. Other than no letter will come after it, okay? Not just that a letter cannot physically attach to it, but no letter will come after it, okay? But of course, a letter can and will come before it, okay? For example, the jim. So the jim would attach directly to it if the jim is before it, but then no letter would come after it, okay? When it's the last letter in the word. And then we've got the ba, the ta, and the tha. So the ba, the ta, and the tha, as you can see, they've gone very much back to how their shape was when they were solo letters, when they were by themselves. Okay, it's the same shape, other than we have this little flick at the beginning of the letters. Okay, and you know why this little flick is here. It's so that it can attach to the letter that comes before it, okay? So it can attach to the letter that comes before it. And of course, these are at the end of a word, so no letter would come after them. So this is how they look when they are at the end of a word. And the same with the jim, ha, and the kha. They look like how they were when they were solo letters, other than the little flick that we have here, which is at the start of the letter, okay? And these flicks here are just here to connect the letter to the previous letter, all right? So for example, if we had a ba, then it would connect to the jim like that. And then the jim would be in this particular form because it's the last letter in the word, okay? And the same for the ha, and the same for the kha. This is how these three letters look when they are the last letter of a word. And then the dal and the dhal, these two, similar to the alif, they appear as they are when they're in the middle of a word, okay? As when they are in the middle of a word, like if we had a ba before this dal, okay? The ba would go there. It would physically connect to the dal, but no letter would come after the dal, okay? It's the last letter in the word. So no letter would come after it. And the same with the dal, okay? We can put another ba here just before connecting it to the dal. So the dal and the dal, same as when they are in the middle of a letter, okay? It will appear the same as when they are in the middle of a letter. It's just that no letter would come after it. And then we have the ra and zay. Again, exactly the same thing as the last two. It would physically attach to the letter before it, yeah? But because it's the last letter in the word, there will be no letter that comes after them. The seen and the sheen. So the seen and the sheen, they actually look exactly the same as when they are a solo letter. Remember, we had this big flick here when it was a letter by itself, okay? Not connected to any other letters. It had this big flick here in the seen and the big flick there in the sheen. Only difference being is it's got the tail at the beginning of the letter so that it can connect to the letter that comes before it in the word, all right? It has the little tail at the beginning of the letter so that it can connect to the letter before it. But when it's at the end of the word, it will have the shape that it has when it's a solo letter, meaning it has the big ending flicks, okay? And then we have the sad and the dad, exactly the same as the seen and the sheen. They appear exactly as they are when they are solo letters, other than the little flick before it so it can connect to the letter that came before it. Again, same thing with the ta and the dha. Yeah, it just has the little flick at the beginning of the letters so that it can connect to the letter before it. Okay, but again, no letter would come after it because it's the last letter in the word. And then we have the ayn and the ghayn. So this one is quite unique actually, because it doesn't look exactly like when it's by itself or when it's at the beginning or even when it's in the middle. Okay, so the ayn, when it's by itself, it looks like this. Yeah, when it's at the beginning of a word, it looks like this. And when it's in the middle of a word, it looks like this. Okay, and now we have the final form, is when it's in the end of a word, it looks like this. Okay, so you have to memorize each of these different stages of the letter. Okay, so here it is when the ayn is at the beginning of, rather the ending of a word. Okay, and here is where it would attach to the letter that came before it. And the same for the ghayn. Remember, these two have the same shape. It's just that the ghayn has a dot above it. Okay, so the letter that comes before it would connect to it physically. Let's have a look at the final row of letters. So we have the fa. The fa looks like this. Again, very similar to how it is when it's the solo version. Okay, when the fa is just by itself, not connected to any letters, it has this shape here, okay, with the dot above it. But here we have the tail that's been added so that it can physically connect to the letter before it, okay? And of course, no letter would come after it. And the same as well for the qaf. When the qaf is by itself, it has this shape here, okay? Same sort of shape that we've got here with the two dots above it, yeah? However, we've got this little tail before it so that it can physically connect to the letter before it. But because it's at the end, no letter would connect to it, okay? Very straightforward, very straightforward. The kaf. The kaf looks exactly how it looks when it's a solo letter, okay? This is how it looked when it was by itself. Difference being, it has this little flick at the beginning of the word, just so that it can connect to the letter that came before it. Okay, and the lam, same thing as well. Looks exactly the same as it does when it's by itself. Just has this little flick here, so it can connect to the letter that came before it as well. And the mim, same thing. It looks exactly how it did when it's a solo letter. Only difference being, again, is the flick at the start so that it can connect to the previous letter, okay? And the noon, very similar to how it is when it's by itself, okay? Remember, it had this shape like this with the singular dot above it, and it would physically attach to the letter that came before it, okay? Would physically come attached to that letter before it, and of course nothing would come after it because we're looking at the letters when they are at the end of a word. And then how about the ha? So the ha is one that also looks quite different, okay? The ha, we said it looks like this when it's by itself, and then we said when it's at the start of a word it would look like this, okay? And then we said when it's at the middle or in the middle of a word, it would look like this, okay? Joining from this point here and this point, from the letter before it and the letter after it. But now we've got the ha when it is at the end of a word. and we would write it like this, okay? Just like what we have above here, okay? So it would attach to the letter previous to it here, okay? It would attach to the letter previous to it, like if we put a ba here, okay? And if we, for example, wanted to put some harakat on it, then you can tell me what does this word now say. So I could put a kasra here and a kasra here. So how would you pronounce this section here? You would say bihi, bihi, okay? And then we have the waw, and the waw again looks the same as when it's in the middle of a word. All right, it just physically connects here to the letter previous to it, and of course nothing would come after it. And the ya, it looks very similar to how it is when it's a solo letter, when it's by itself, okay? It's just this little flick at the start has changed slightly just so that it can physically connect to the letter that comes before it, and of course no letter would come after it because it's the final letter in the word. Jamil. So alhamdulillah, that is the end of this section here, how the letters appear at the end of a word. It should have been quite straightforward because we've already looked at how the letters look and sound when they're by themselves, and then how do they look when they're at the start of a word, at the middle of a word, and now at the end of a word. So if you can just unsuspend the Anki decks related to the letters when they're at the end of a word and start on those, and inshallah everything should be getting much easier now as you've been going through all of the cards and really memorizing everything that we've been covering in the course. Okay? So, as always, I will see you in the next one.